J5 prime charging port repair. You'll need a heat gun. Heat up the front glass. Do not exceed over 65 degrees. Use a thin blade or a spudger and get under the glass in the frame. I like to start down near the charging port area. For reasons, I like to stay away from any flex cables. Always keep the heat on at about 65 degrees. Grab yourself a business card. Now, it's better to get underneath the actual whole LCD unit. In this video, I accidentally got under the glass and separated the glass from the backlight, as you can see. Always keep the heat on consistently. As you can see in the video, I've separated the top glass from the LCD. So I'm just getting a business card underneath the actual backlight, and I'm going to separate the whole unit as one. Add more heat to the top of the phone and slightly just pry the LCD up. Now you can see that there is a LCD connector there. Just disconnect this. Now it's time to remove the screws. There's approximately about 15 screws there to remove. Now that the screws have been removed, it's time to remove the middle bezel from the frame. Don't forget to take the SIM trays and SD card out. Use a thin blade and get in between the middle bezel and the back case. Disconnect the battery and any other connectors connecting to the board. There are two screws holding in the board, one down the bottom and one up the top just above the battery connector. Remove these. Now you have the board out, it's time to start removing the charging port. In this repair I'm using a little contraption that's going to hold my logic board in place. This is not really a must, but it helps. In this repair you're going to need some soldering wick, some flux, some solder, toothbrush, some tweezers, screwdriver, Phillips screwdriver, and heat gun. Start adding plenty of flux around the cradle of the charging port, as well as the connectors that connect onto the logic board pads. Now, this is where it gets tricky. You will need to add plenty of heat. Try not to add too much heat where the chips are that are connected to the logic board. Just focus around the charging port itself. Get the tweezers and just kind of use a bit of force to pry the charging port away. You can never use too much flux in this type of repair. Flux is the key. Alright, if you can look at the video, I'm going on each side of the charging port where the little hooks hook into the actual logic board itself. This repair is probably one of the most difficult repairs to do, especially when it comes to a customer's phone. You've only got one chance. It has taken me a lot of attempts to actually get this far. The only way to learn is to put yourself in the deep end. Right, so it's time to start desoldering the old solder from the little cradle holes there, as well as just in the middle there you'll see the little connector pads. They need to be cleaned up too. Just take your time, and the secret is just get it very clean, so when the next charging port goes into place, it's going to sit in there very nicely. The most difficult part of this repair is where you fail the most, is right there, is those little pads there where the charging port connectors sit on. While getting the charging port off, you can actually tear these off. Once you tear them off, it's very difficult to repair. Now start cleaning up the board with some ISO and your toothbrush. Start positioning your charging port and making sure it's going to fit, and do any modifications you need to do to the charging port to make it fit. Now you need to line the prongs up exactly up to the connectors that are sitting on the board, the little pads. Once you have lined the charging port up, it's time to add more flux. Put a bit of solder onto the one side of the charging port just to hold it in place. Add solder to the other side. And same again to the back side of the charging port. What I'm doing here is I'm just tidying up the solder a little bit and making it all flow nice and evenly. Spray more ISO there and clean up the charging port where you've just soldered. It's time to add flux to where the feet of the charging port actually go into, the little holes that go into the board. You're just going to solder those up and make sure that the charging port is nice and sturdy. Add some ISO, just spray a bit of ISO there and clean it up with a toothbrush again. Now I have a multi-reader there. I am going to test for power. Unfortunately, you can't see it in the video there because I've zoomed pretty close up. Now it should read 5 volts on one of the pins there. If it doesn't read anything, then you've done something wrong, and just keep trying. As you can see, I'm about to solder the little pins onto the pad. This, you've got to be very careful. Don't put too much solder in, because if they touch, you won't get any type of power. It will basically conflict. Right, after you've cleaned up the charging port with ISO, it's time to do its last test with the multi-reader there. Now the multi-reader should display 5 volts. And there we go. Now it's time to marry the logic board back into the frame, or the middle bezel. Reconnect any connectors, and don't forget to screw in the 2 logic board screws to hold it in place. Here's the camera, there's the service cable. There was a bit of flux stuck in one of the connectors there, so I'm just giving it a bit of a clean. Now let's test this charging port with the display on. Yes, we have power. Awesome. Now remove the LCD panel. Place the middle bezel back into the back of the phone. Rescrew all the screws. Insert your SIM trays and SD card tray. Now it's time to clean up the frame. I usually just like to use a little screwdriver. Finish it off with a rag and some ISO, and just give it a good wipe down. Use double adhesive tape and just run it along the sides there, just to give the LCD some extra sturdiness. Check the LCD to make sure nothing's obstructing it. Use B7000 glue and start gluing the outer edge of the frame. Take note, make sure you don't glue too close around any front cameras or anything that's important where you can't have glue run inside it. reconnect the LCD connector and install the little plastic shield that holds in the connector from popping out. Now seat the LCD back into the frame. Make sure it's all nice and even. I like to use rubber bands to stick the LCD back into place. Some people would use books, others would just hold the frame down there till the glue's done, but rubber bands is the way to go. Now test the charging port one more time. And there you have it, guys. Thanks for watching.